The American general who played a key role in drafting Japan's constitution was Douglas MacArthur. He was the supreme commander of the Allied powers and was responsible for overseeing the occupation of Japan following World War II. MacArthur was known to be very strict in his oversight of the constitution drafting process. He took a personal interest in the development of the new Japanese constitution. He reportedly read every single draft and made numerous revisions and suggestions. One of the most notable inclusions by General MacArthur was that of Article 9 in the Japanese Constitution. Article 9 renounces war and the use of force as a means of settling international disputes. This is considered one of the key contributions of the American general to the final version of the Japanese Constitution. This pacifist constitution has prevented Japan for the last 75 years from having a standing army or projecting force in its near abroad. And that decision was taken by an American general, not by the Japanese people. The pacifist constitution prevents Japan from maintaining a standing army. It also limits the country's military to just defensive purposes. This means that Japan cannot engage in aggressive wars or use military force to expand its territory or influence. Additionally, the Constitution also prohibits Japan from entering into alliances or treaties that would threaten the peace and security of other countries. But all of that is about to change, with Japan fearing for its long-term security after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the recent tensions between China and Taiwan, and most importantly, the repeated missile tests by North Korea over the last 1 year. On Crux Decode, will Japan fundamentally reorient its military and security architecture? Will the current government under Prime Minister Kishida be able to drop or amend Article 9? And where does this leave Japan's long-standing ties with America and its long-standing rivalry with China? In recent years, there's been a debate in Japan about whether the country should change its constitution or to allow for a more robust military. Japan's former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, for example, had been a vocal advocate for reinterpreting the constitution to allow for a more active military. However, the majority of the Japanese population still supports the pacifist constitution, and they don't want any changes in that constitution. But that is not stopping Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida from looking beyond his country's traditional alliance with the United States to deter China. He has recently been on a whirlwind trip of some of the G7 member countries as he tries to shore up support for a more militarist Japan. On his tour of the Group of 7 countries last week, which came after the biggest overhaul of Japan's security policy since World War II, Kishida told the French President Emmanuel Macron that the security of Europe and the Indo-Pacific were indivisible. He signed a deal on mutual troop access with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and also agreed with Italian leader Giorgia Meloni to upgrade defense ties between Tokyo and Rome. But make no mistake, Japan's alliance with Washington, complete with its nuclear umbrella, remains the cornerstone of Japan's military strategy. Something that was also reiterated by US President Joe Biden in his White House meeting with Prime Minister Kishida. That was the conclusion of Prime Minister Kishida's 5-nation tour. Japan is increasingly realizing that they cannot rely entirely on the United States, both for political reasons and simply for scale. They need extra help, and that's where Britain, France, Italy, Australia, and Canada, as well as other G7 countries, come into play. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, North Korea's growing missile prowess, and rising tensions around Taiwan have all made Japan paranoid about its security. Chinese military exercises in recent times have involved throwing missiles into waters very close to Japan. North Korea has also tested many missiles which have flown over Japanese airspace and fallen into Japanese waters. The joint statement at the White House blamed China and North Korea leaving Japan with no choice but to ramp up its military capability. Now, none of this obliges any of Japan's partners to come to its aid in the event of a conflict over Taiwan or the East China Sea islands that are disputed between Tokyo and Beijing. Only the United States is treaty-bound to defend Japan in case it is attacked. Japan's outreach to partners like Australia and the UK only serves as an insurance cover in case US power in the Asia-Pacific begins to fade. Japan is pushing ahead with its largest military buildup in decades. It is likely intent on sending a signal to China. Under a revised national security strategy that was announced last month, Tokyo has committed to increasing its annual defense budget to 2% of its GDP over the next 5 years. That would make Japan the third largest country in terms of its defense spending after the United States and China. Japan's current defense budget is a little over $40 billion, which is expected to surpass $50 billion in 2023 and eventually reach a staggering $300 billion over the next 5 years. But Prime Minister Kishida must also be wary of domestic politics. His cabinet stands on shaky ground. Recently, he lost 4 ministers in under 3 months to a whole host of scandals. The Japanese leader's personal approval ratings sank below 30% at the end of last year. The ruling Liberal Democratic Party has still not been able to fully recover from the fallout of the Unification Church controversy following former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's assassination. But in all, to better protect itself, Japan is increasing its defense spending, it is acquiring long-range missiles, and it's also shoring up its defense partnerships, as was in evidence in Mr. Kishida's meetings with his G7 partners. The next decade could very well upend the security architecture that has held well for the last 7 decades in the Asia-Pacific, and Japan is getting ready for that.
न रुके न थके न झुके और आज दोबारा आ गए.
The game pretty much changed in those first 40 minutes.
It's what you do after failure that defines who you are.
Walking the streets of the future is really going to be breathtaking.